dawn breaks over endless Siberian tundra, where the only evidence of human presence is a trail of gigantic tire tracks vanishing into the blue-white emptiness. In a country that built no roads across much of its vast empire, how did the Soviet Union move tanks, missiles, even pieces of its nuclear arsenal through mud, snow, and frozen swamps, using trucks so massive that many doubted they were real? If you are fascinated by the extremes of military engineering, subscribe to join us on these journeys beyond the end of the road. As the first engine roars to life and the steel axles bite into the ice, we begin with the machine that redefined what a heavy-duty truck could do. The crazy 255 rumbles to life with a sound that echoes across the frozen landscape, a deep diesel growl from its Yam Z238 V8 engine, displacing nearly 15 liters and producing roughly 240 horsepower. This was the Soviet Union's answer to a problem that swallowed lesser machines: how to haul heavy loads through mud, snow, and trackless forest where roads were only lines on a map. With its 6x6 all-wheel drive configuration, leaf spring suspension, and a payload of 7 to 9 tons, the Krai AZ-255 became the backbone of military convoys and civilian expeditions alike. Oversized, low-pressure tires, fed by a central tire inflation system, let drivers adapt on the fly, bleeding air for soft ground and pumping it back up for gravel or ice. A mechanic who spent years restoring these trucks once said, "If you keep the tires right and the oil clean, a Kraz will pull a house through a swamp." That was no exaggeration. In the Carpathians, these trucks dragged artillery where horses and tractors failed. Deep in Siberian forests, demilitarized Kraz 255s still work today, hauling timber and peat across bogs that swallow smaller vehicles whole. The design was simple, almost brutal: a rigid frame, mechanical 5-speed gearbox, and a cab built for function, not comfort. But it was precisely this blend of power and adaptability that made the Krai AZ-255 legendary, a workhorse that could be mended with a wrench and a length of wire, yet tough enough to keep armies and industries moving when the world turned to mud. But as the Soviet arsenal grew heavier and more complex, even the mighty Krai AZ would meet its limits. The need for something bigger, able to move tanks, missiles, and shielded cargo, was about to take center stage. The MAZ-537 arrived in 1959, and with it, the Soviet military entered a new era of heavy logistics. This was not just a truck, it was a mobile foundation, engineered to pull loads that would crush ordinary vehicles. Its heart was a 38.8-liter V12 diesel engine, a tank-derived powerhouse generating roughly 525 horsepower. 8 driven wheels, each fed by a hydrodynamic transmission and planetary reduction hubs, worked together to multiply torque across broken ground. The result, a machine that could tow between 40 and 65 tons without hesitation, move tanks, missile launchers, radar stations, and anything else the Cold War demanded be moved at a moment's notice. Stretching over 9 meters and weighing more than 21 tons even before it was hitched to a trailer, the MAZ-537's scale was matched only by its versatility. Drivers could adjust tire pressure on the move, shifting from hard-packed roads to deep mud or snow without stopping. The suspension, with leaf springs on all axles, absorbed punishing shocks, letting the truck keep pace with convoys or crawl through disaster zones. During the Chernobyl disaster, these tractors were pressed into service, hauling massive shielding slabs and contaminated debris out of the exclusion zone. One logistics officer wrote in a field note, "Only the MAZ could be trusted to pull a reactor lid through the ash." With its 8x8 layout and a drive system designed to conquer terrain as much as distance, the MAZ-537 became the backbone of Soviet strategic mobility. Its very existence reshaped what military planners believed possible, setting the stage for even more radical experiments in moving warheads, armor, and infrastructure across the world's most unforgiving landscapes. In the early 1960s, Soviet engineers took a bold leap into Arctic problem-solving with a machine that looked more at home on another planet than on the Siberian tundra. The ZIL E-167 was built to tackle snow so deep and soft that even tracked vehicles struggled. Its answer was two massive 7-liter V8 gasoline engines, each producing around 180 horsepower, mounted side by side in the rear. These fed power to all 6 wheels, each shod in enormous balloon tires, nearly 6 feet tall and wide enough to float the 7-ton vehicle across drifts that would trap anything else on wheels. During field trials in the Yamal Peninsula, test drivers reported that the E-167 could plow through a full meter of fresh snow at a steady crawl, and even ford rivers nearly 2 meters deep. But the complexity of its twin-engine drivetrain paired with the sheer size of its tires made mass production impossible. A technician who rode in the cab during those Arctic runs once joked that it was like steering a ship through a snowstorm, powerful but always on the edge of going adrift. Despite its futuristic look, the ZIL E-167 was never intended for the moon. The lunar rover myth likely grew from its otherworldly silhouette and the era's fascination with space. In reality, it remained a one-off experiment, proof that the Soviet search for mobility in the world's harshest places sometimes led to machines as strange as the landscape itself. Sand, heat, and endless distance demanded a new kind of heavy hauler. The KZ-KT-7428 rolled out in the early 1990s with a mission far from the Siberian cold. This was a machine tuned for deserts and export. Under the angular hood sat a 650 horsepower V12 diesel, breathing through oversized cooling packs to keep temperatures in check when the mercury soared. Independent suspension on all 8 wheels let the truck float over dunes and rutted tracks, while a central tire pressure system meant drivers could dial in grip for soft sand or hard-packed gravel without stopping. Armor plating around the cab offered some protection from stray fire or flying debris, but comfort took a back seat to durability. Operators in the Middle East noted how the suspension handled sharp heat drops at night, with one mechanic recalling that you could drive from dawn until the stars came out, and the engine never lost its nerve. The KZ-KT-7428 became the backbone for towing BM-30 Smerch rocket launchers and other oversized loads across terrain where even tracks might bog down. Export clients requested tweaks, extra filters, heat-resistant wiring, and dust-proof seals, turning this Soviet giant into a global workhorse wherever the ground ran dry and the stakes ran high. The MAZ-7310 stands at the intersection of brute force and battlefield precision, a mobile launch pad built to carry and fire the R-17 Elbrus, better known in the West as the Scud missile. Introduced in the 1970s, this 8x8 giant drew power from the same V12 engine family as its heavy-haul predecessors, but the real innovation lay beneath its armored skin. The chassis was engineered for more than just transport. It was a stabilizing platform. When the order came, hydraulic outriggers and a reinforced suspension locked the vehicle to the earth, steadying the missile for launch in minutes, even on soft ground or uneven forest clearings. Tire pressure could be adjusted mid-operation, allowing the crew to roll off muddy tracks and set up on a patch of frozen tundra or dusty steppe without delay. One frontline operator recalled that you could go from highway to hiding spot and be ready to fire before anyone knew you had arrived. This speed and adaptability turned the MAZ-7310 into a cornerstone of Soviet quick-strike doctrine, giving commanders the confidence to reposition missile batteries as the battle shifted. In a conflict defined by mobility and surprise, the difference between being ready in 10 minutes or 30 minutes could decide the outcome. With every axle and stabilizer, this truck transformed the landscape into a launch site, no matter how remote or unpredictable. In 1987, the ink dried on a treaty that would redraw the boundaries of military possibility. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, signed by the Soviet Union and the United States, called for the elimination of entire classes of missiles, among them the 9K-714 Oka. Mounted on the amphibious BAZ-6944 chassis, the Oka could travel up to 400 kilometers, bridging rivers and rough ground with a speed that unsettled Western planners. Official documents listed its range just below treaty limits, but its true capabilities sparked debate in both Moscow and Washington. Within months, units across Eastern Europe began dismantling these launchers, their diesel engines silenced not by mechanical failure, but by the weight of international law. The Oka's removal was not the product of engineering limits or battlefield defeat. It was the outcome of negotiation, a reminder that even the most advanced machines can be unmade by signatures on a page. Two visions of extreme mobility now stand side by side. The CAMAZ 7850, better known as Platform O, channels nearly 1,500 horsepower through a diesel-electric heart. Each of its 16 wheels houses its own electric motor, guided by software that measures slip and torque hundreds of times per second. An engineer on the project once described it as driving a power station on wheels. Every axle thinks for itself. This system allows the truck to adjust traction instantly, keeping 85 tons of missile or cargo moving across rutted steppe or icy roads, no matter which wheels lose grip. This is power, but when the ground turns to bottomless snow or broken ice, wheels have limits. That is where the Vityaz DT30PM comes in, an articulated twin module machine with a 710 horsepower diesel and tracks wide enough to float 30 tons over permafrost. Its hydraulic joint lets the two sections twist and climb, flexing over Arctic ridges that would defeat any rigid frame. An Arctic supply pilot summed it up: wheels get clever, tracks just go. Both are answers to the Soviet question of how to move the immovable. One relies on digital precision, the other on brute mechanical adaptation. Each is a product of its time, pushing the boundary between control and raw traction. At the outer edge of Soviet ambition stood the MAZ-7907, a vehicle so vast it seemed more like a moving piece of infrastructure than a truck. Built in the mid-1980s for the RT-23 Molodets missile, it stretched 28 meters from end to end and rode on 24 driven wheels, each one powered by its own electric motor. At its heart spun a 1,250 horsepower gas turbine, a power plant more at home in a jet than on the ground. But raw force was only half the story. The real challenge lay in keeping that power under control. During full-scale testing at the Bronicy Proving Ground, engineers pushed the prototype to its limits, logging every vibration and every surge of heat. As the turbine roared and the electric drive strained under a simulated missile load, temperatures inside the transmission began to climb. Cooling systems fought to keep up, but the heat kept rising. In one engineer's words, it was like watching a glacier melt from the inside, slow at first, then unstoppable. The drive system overheated and the project halted in its tracks. No second prototype followed. In the end, the MAZ-7907 became a legend, not for what it carried, but for the line it drew between what was possible and what the laws of physics would allow. Today, the legacy of these machines endures, visible in modern military logistics and in civilian industries, pushing deeper into remote frontiers. As global tensions and technological ambitions rise once more, the scale of what gets built still mirrors the scale of our anxieties. What would we move if nothing stopped us? Share your thoughts below.